When you're learning a language, there's this point you hit. It's like, okay, I know the words, I get the grammar, mostly.
Mm.
But when you actually try to speak, it just doesn't flow.
Mm.
It doesn't sound like the native speakers you hear.
Right, that naturalness is missing. The rhythm, the melody, what linguists sometimes call the prosody.
The music, yeah, exactly. It feels like you're playing the notes, but there's no music there.
And that music, the intonation, the stress patterns, how sounds link and change in real time, that's often the biggest hurdle to sounding truly fluent. And actually, to understanding native speakers when they're talking at a normal pace.
Well, that hidden layer, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We've got this really interesting source material we've been looking at. It's basically a guide to a technique called shadowing.
Ah, shadowing, a classic.
Yeah, and it uses this simple, everyday example in American English voicemail to show how it works, and, more importantly, what tiny details you need to listen for.
Which is such a great approach, that instead of, abstract rules floating in space, it grounds everything in a real piece of language, something short, something authentic.
Exactly. So our mission here in this deep dive is to really unpack this source.
Mm.
We want to figure out, okay, what is shadowing according to this guide? Why does it say it's so effective?
Right.
And this is the really fascinating part. I think we're going to get into the weeds. We'll look at all those specific little linguistic things the source points out in that voicemail.
The nitty-gritty.
Yeah. The pronunciations that trip people up, the sounds that seem to vanish, the way the pitch goes up and down, all the stuff that makes American English sound, well, American.
Mm-hmm.
Think of this deep dive as your shortcut, maybe, to noticing those things you might be missing
Mm-hmm.
and understanding why native speakers sound the way they do.
It's really about training your ear and your mouth in a way, moving beyond just knowing about the language to feeling how it actually works in conversation.
And honestly, whether you're actively trying to, nail that American sound, or maybe you're just fascinated by language itself, like,
Mm-hmm.
how do we even make these sounds? Why do words squish together?
Mm-hmm.
I think this deep dive is going to have some really cool insights for you.
Absolutely. There's a lot under the hood of even simple speech.
Okay, let's dig in then. So first things first, based on this source material.
Hmm.
What is shadowing? Why does it claim this technique is such a powerful tool?
Well, the source defines it pretty straightforwardly. It's basically listening to a native speaker, or, crucially, a speaker of the specific accent you're aiming for.
Right, the target speaker.
Exactly. And you repeat what they say, not just the words, but exactly how they say it.
Exactly how. So like trying to copy everything.
Everything. That's the key the source emphasizes. It's mimicry. You're aiming to replicate their pronunciation, obviously, but also their intonation, the melody, the ups and downs,
Ugh.
their speed, their rhythm, the pauses, everything. You're trying to become their vocal shadow, essentially.
A vocal shadow. I like that. It sounds intense.
It can be. And the source makes some pretty bold claims about the benefits. It says this kind of practice helps improve pronunciation, boosts your overall fluency, meaning, how smoothly and naturally you speak,
Right, that effortlessness.
and importantly, builds your confidence when you actually go to use the language, which, let's face it, are things most learners really want.
Definitely. Better pronunciation, more fluency, more confidence. Sign me up. But why does it work so well? What's the mechanism, according to the source and, what we know about language learning?
Well, the source implies, and it aligns with linguistic research, that shadowing forces you to engage with the language on a really fundamental level. It's auditory and motor.
Auditory and motor,
Oh.
meaning ears and mouth.
Pretty much. You sort of bypass the analytical part of your brain for a moment, the part that's busy translating or worrying about grammar rules, and you focus purely on hearing and reproducing the sound.
So it's less thinking, more doing, like training your reflexes.
Precisely. It's almost like kinesthetic learning, but for language. You're building new muscle memory in your tongue, your lips, your jaw, and at the same time, you're training your ear to pick up on subtleties you probably missed before.
Like how kids learn. They just mimic sounds, right?
Exactly. Think about babies babbling. They're listening intently, then trying to make those sounds themselves long before they understand meaning. Shadowing kind of taps into that same powerful, natural learning pathway, but in a more structured way.
Okay, I can see that. By focusing just on the sound, you're forced to notice the little details, how it's actually said, not just what the dictionary says it should sound like.
Right. You start to really hear things like syllable stress, which words get emphasized in a sentence, how words blend together phenomena like linking and reduction. These prosodic features, they're absolutely vital for sounding natural.
Prosodic features. That's the music again, isn't it?
That's the music. And shadowing is like ear training and performance practice rolled into one. It connects the abstract sounds you might see in a phonetic chart to the actual messy, flowing reality of speech.
And this particular source, it's zeroing in specifically on the American accent, using a native U.S. speaker.
Yes, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Because different accents of English, British, Australian, American, etc., they have their own distinct sound systems, rhythms, intonation patterns. Shadowing is most effective when you target a specific accent because you're working with a consistent model.
So you're not trying to copy a moving target.
Exactly. You focus on one specific way of speaking.
Now, the source is honest about something. It mentions feeling awkward. It says something like, I felt silly the first time I tried this in German. And I totally get that. Trying to mimic someone else's voice, their pitch, it feels performative, almost embarrassing.
Oh, completely normal. That initial awkwardness is almost universal, I think. We're so used to thinking about what we want to say that deliberately focusing on how someone else is saying it feels unnatural, like you're doing an impression.
Yeah, like you're an actor warming up or something.
Right. But the key thing, as the source points out, is not to let that feeling stop you. It's a practice tool. It's for your development. It's not a performance. The source basically says, yeah, it feels weird, but trust us, it works.
Okay. Message received. Push through the weirdness. The results are worth it, according to this guide. So we know what it is, why it supposedly works. How does the source suggest actually doing it? What's the method using this voicemail example?
Well, the source's approach here is, I think, really smart. It uses a very simple, realistic snippet of language, just a casual voicemail or voice note to a friend.
Not some formal lecture or news report.
Exactly, because a casual message is packed with the features of natural, everyday speech, pauses, maybe slight hesitations, the normal speaking speed, informal ways of saying things you actually need for real conversations.
That makes a lot of sense. It's practical.
Very practical, and the core instruction is simple. You'll be my shadow. Listen, repeat. Mimic everything, tone, speed, rhythm, all those little linguistic details we were talking about.
But it's not just, here's the audio, good luck, right? The source does more than that.
Oh yeah, much more. It doesn't just play the whole thing and expect you to keep up. It breaks it down, phrase by phrase. It'll play a short chunk, pause, and then, this is crucial, it points out specific things to listen for within that chunk before you even try to repeat it.
So it guides your listening. Like a coach saying, okay, listen for this sound here, or notice how the pitch does this.
Precisely. It turns it from just blind mimicry into informed, targeted practice. It directs your attention. Hey, notice how this sound disappears, or listen to the melody on this phrase. Then, after highlighting the feature, it gives you the space to repeat that specific phrase, trying to incorporate what you just learned.
So it's like getting the answers before the quiz. That seems much more helpful than just trying to catch everything at once.
Definitely. And the source also explicitly mentions, feel free to pause, refers to its own format, maybe a video pause, and practice a phrase over and over if you need to.
So you control the pace. If one bit is tricky, you can loop it.
Exactly, because some sounds or patterns will naturally be harder for you depending on your first language and what you're used to. Being able to isolate a difficult phrase, listen, repeat, listen, repeat. That's how you build that muscle memory until it starts to feel more automatic.
This whole method, the realistic material, breaking it down, pointing out specific features, letting you pause and practice it, sounds really effective. It makes tackling the complexity of real speech seem manageable.
It really does. It takes something that can feel overwhelming, the continuous stream of native speech, and dissects it into learnable components. And by focusing on those specific features the source highlights, your practice becomes super targeted. You're not just vaguely trying to sound better, you're actively working on incorporating specific native-like patterns.
Okay, I'm sold on the method. It sounds solid. But now we get to the really juicy part, for me anyway, part 3. The deep dive into the actual details the source pulls out of that American English voicemail. This is where we get the secrets, right?
Absolutely. This is where the source uses that simple voice note as a kind of living laboratory. It showcases all these linguistic phenomena that are everywhere in casual American English, but often fly under the radar for learners. These aren't weird exceptions. They're the standard way things work in natural connected speech.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning. The voicemail in the source starts with, hey, it's me. What does the source point out there?
Intonation. It specifically notes that the pitch isn't flat. It goes up slightly on hey, and then it comes down at the end on me. Hey, up, it's me, down.
A little up and down curve, like a little musical phrase.
Exactly. And the source encourages practicing that specific contour. In American English, that kind of rise-fall pattern is super common for simple greetings, short statements, introductions. It signals, here's a piece of information, I'm friendly, the thought is complete.
What if you didn't do that? What if it was flat? Hey, it's me.
It might sound a bit robotic, maybe uninterested, or even slightly abrupt. And if you went up at the end, hey, it's me, that would sound like a question, like you're unsure if the person knows who me is. So getting that simple rise-fall contour right at the start sets a natural, friendly tone. It's a small thing, but it matters.
Wow. Okay, intonation carries a lot. What about sounds going missing? The source mentions consonant reduction. The example is just wanted.
Ah, yes, a classic. The source points out that in this particular utterance, the speaker doesn't pronounce the T sound in either word, not in just and not in wanted.
Both of them. So it sounds like just want.
Exactly, just want to check in.
That feels like a big change. Dropping sounds completely.
It is significant, and it's incredibly common. The source generalizes this, saying that in American English, if a T sound comes at the end of a word, or sometimes in the middle, especially before another consonant, or just in fast speech, it often gets totally dropped.
Totally dropped. Not just softened, but gone.
Often, yes. Think about how people say, I don't know. Very often, it's, I don't know, right? The T vanishes, or next door becomes next door. Most people becomes most people. It's a systematic reduction to make speech flow more easily. The tongue doesn't have to make that distinct closure.
Okay, that explains why sometimes you listen and feel like sounds you expect to hear just aren't there.
Precisely. And trying to pronounce every single T or D perfectly actually sounds unnatural and slows you down. Shadowing helps you internalize where these sounds typically get dropped, so you learn to produce the reduced form yourself and understand it when you hear it.
So consonants can disappear. What about vowels? The source picks out two in the phrase, to check in.
Right. Here, the source notes that to isn't pronounced with its full, strong oo vowel sound, like if you said the word to. Instead, it gets reduced.
Reduced to what?
To the schwa sound, that little neutral sound. So to check in becomes to check in.
Ah, the schwa. The unsung hero or maybe villain of English pronunciation. It's everywhere, isn't it?
It really is. The source mentions that function words like to, especially in fast speech, often lose their full vowel sound. This happens because to isn't stressed here. The stress is on check, to check in.
So unstressed syllables often get this sound.
Very often. It's the most common vowel sound in English precisely because it's the default sound for unstressed syllables. Think about a becoming a book for can becoming kun, and it becoming un. It's all about efficiency. Strong vowels take effort. The schwa is minimal effort.
That feels like a really important principle. If a word isn't stressed, its vowel probably weakens, often to schwa. That must affect the rhythm hugely.
Absolutely. English is a stress-timed language. Stressed syllables fall at roughly regular intervals, and the unstressed syllables in between get squeezed or compressed, often through vowel reduction. Mastering the schwa and knowing where vowels reduce is fundamental to getting that natural English rhythm. Shadowing forces you to do it because you're copying someone who does it naturally.
Okay, dropped consonants, reduced vowels. What about how words bump into each other? The source talks about linking and dropping sounds, starting with, and see how you're doing.
Yeah, first it points out that the bead sound at the end of and often just falls away before a consonant sound like the and see. So and see becomes and see.
Another dropped consonant. It's like spoken English is trying to get rid of them.
Well, the difficult ones maybe, especially at the ends of words. But then the source gives another example with and followed by a vowel.
And I.
Okay, what happens there? It says this deed often still drops, but then the remaining and sound of and kind of connects smoothly, or a leads with the I sound.
Leads, is that like
Yeah.
slides together, links up?
Exactly. I leads is just a slightly more technical term for that smooth connection or linking between sounds across word boundaries. So instead of an I with a gap, you get an I. The final consonant of one word links directly onto the initial vowel of the next.
Like rock and roll, becoming rock and roll, or turn it off, sounding like turn it off.
Precisely those kinds of connections. It makes the speech flow without little stops between words. It's absolutely fundamental to sounding smooth and connected. Shadowing helps you feel where those links happen naturally.
This is fascinating. Okay, what else? The source mentioned something about ing endings, using doing as the example.
Yes, it observes that very often in casual American speech, The final ing sound, that a sound made at the back of the mouth, gets shortened or reduced to just an n sound in made at the front.
So instead of doing with the sound in sing,
Yeah.
it's more like doing with a sound in sin.
Exactly.
Right.
How you doing? What's happening? I'm going home. It's a very common feature, especially in informal situations or when the ing word isn't stressed. It's a shift from a velar nasal to an alveolar nasal N.
That feels like a really specific insider detail. Knowing to say doin' instead of doing seems like it would make a big difference in sounding casual and natural.
It definitely does. It's one of those small phonetic details that clearly marks informal American speech. Noticing it and being able to produce it is a big step towards sounding more authentic in those contexts.
Okay, so we've had falling intonation on statements, dropped T's and vowels reducing to schwa, consonants linking to vowels, M becoming N. What about question intonation? The source uses, "Are we still on for dinner this Friday?"
Right, and here it highlights the opposite intonation pattern to the greeting. It says the intonation goes up at the end. Are we still on for dinner this Friday?
Up. That classic upward inflection for a question. That's pretty standard, isn't it? It tells the listener you're asking something.
Yes, it's the primary way we mark yes-no questions in English. That rising pitch signals, I expect a yes or no answer, or I'm seeking confirmation. It clearly contrasts with the falling pitch we usually use for statements or for way questions like, where are we going? Down.
So the melody itself is part of the grammar, telling you if it's a statement or a question.
Absolutely. If you used falling intonation on, are we still on for dinner this Friday? It might sound like you're reminding someone or making an assumption, not really asking. So getting that rise right is crucial for clear communication and, frankly, for politeness when asking.
Makes sense. The source then brings up linking again with still on. What's the point there?
It notes that the final sound of still connects smoothly, or allides, to the O sound at the beginning of on.
Consonant linking to a vowel again, so still on.
Exactly. Still on. It avoids that little break between the words, just like tell us becomes tell us, or call Alan becomes call on. That final consonant sound naturally attaches to the following vowel sound.
It really seems like linking and reduction are just happening constantly.
They are. It's the glue holding connected speech together.
Okay, now for some maybe more dramatic changes. The source mentions, do you remember becoming? Joel.
Haha, yes. That's a fantastic example of really fast, informal speech processes. What happens is assimilation and reduction combined. The D sound at the end of do and the J sound like Y in yes at the beginning of you often merge together.
D plus Y, just.
Exactly. They create a D sound, the J sound in judge, and the vowel in you often reduces to schwa or disappears. So do you remember can absolutely sound like je remember or je remember in rapid casual conversation.
Wow. Jur remember. That sounds almost like a different word entirely. No wonder learners get lost sometimes.
It's a huge transformation, and if you're listening for clear do you, you'll completely miss it. Same with things like did you eat becoming did you eat, or want to becoming wanna, going to becoming gonna. These aren't sloppy, they're predictable patterns of reduction and assimilation.
The source also mentions your end, linking together smoothly. Your end.
Yep, another case of linking. This time there are sound connecting to the E.
And it revisits talk to you soon, saying it becomes talk to you.
Right, reinforcing that reduction of to and the smooth connection. It emphasizes you wouldn't typically hear a fully pronounced talk to you in this context. It's faster, smoother talk to you.
The more examples we go through, the clearer it becomes that spoken words aren't like beads on a string. They melt into each other. They change each other.
That's a great way to put it. It's co-articulation. The position of your mouth for the next sound influences how you pronounce the current sound. It's all about smooth transitions. Shadowing helps you physically experience those transitions instead of just reading about them.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. The source talks about emphasis or stress. The example sentence is, I found this great Italian place downtown and I think you'll love it. What's highlighted there?
It points out that the speaker naturally puts more emphasis on certain words. Great, Italian place downtown, and love it.
Why those words?
Because they carry the most important information. They're the content words. Adjectives, great, Italian. Nouns, place, downtown. And the key verb expressing opinion, love. The little function words like I, this, and thank you, they get less stress. They're often reduced.
So stressing the key words helps the listener grab the main points quickly. Great place, Italian, downtown, you'll love it.
Exactly. It's called sentence stress, and it's fundamental to English rhythm and comprehension. We stress the information carriers, But stress can do more than just highlight content. The source gives another example. You have to read it.
Okay.
It notes that the speaker emphasizes have to.
Like you really have to read it, showing strong recommendation.
Precisely. Here, have to is acting like a strong modal verb, expressing necessity or obligation, and stressing it adds extra force. It conveys attitude. Think about I want to go versus I want to go. The stress changes the nuance. Shadowing helps you pick up on where natives place stress not just for information, but for emphasis and attitude, too.
So it's not just what you say, or even how you pronounce the sounds, but which words you punch a little harder. Another layer.
Absolutely.
Okay, what about those pesky past tense endings? The ed, the source brings up, mentioned, and finished.
Always a fun topic. Yes, the source correctly notes that the ed on mentioned sounds like a D, but on finished, it sounds like a T.
And the source kind of throws up its hands and says, you often just have to memorize these? Is that true?
Well, it feels like memorization to learners. But there actually are rules. The source hinting at the different sounds shows awareness. The rule depends on the very last sound of the verb before you add the ed.
Okay, what's the rule?
It's about voicing. Is the final sound made with vocal cord vibration, voiced, or without voiceless? Rule 1, if the verb base ends in a T or D sound already, like want or need, the ed adds a whole syllable, sounding like ed or D, wanted, needed.
Got it. Adds a syllable.
Rule 2, if the verb base ends in any other voiceless sound like P, K, F, S, C, H, the EA sounds like T. Finished ends in K, which is voiceless, so it's a finished. Asked ends in K, voiceless, so esked. Left ends in F, voiceless, so left.
Okay, voiceless sound plus evi ocus dest.
Rule 3, if the verb base ends in any other voice sound like BG, VZ, like in measure DJ, or any vowel sound, or sounds like L, R, M, N, the E sounds like D. Mention ends in N, which is voiced, so nend. Played ends in a vowel, voiced, so pled. Lived ends in V, voiced, so leved.
Voice sound plus AD sound. Okay, that makes sense. So finished is voices, left E is voiceless plus S. Mentioned N is voiced TED. The rules work.
They do, but the source's point about memorization is kind of true in practice. Learners don't usually stop mid-sentence to think, is N voiced? Okay, add D. They internalize the patterns through lots of exposure and practice, like shadowing, so it becomes automatic, like memorization.
And the source also adds that even these sounds might get dropped sometimes in speech.
Right. Especially the D sound at the end. Just like other final consonants, it can get reduced or assimilated in connected speech. Spoken language is always looking for efficiency.
Man, it feels like every rule has an exception or a variation depending on how fast you talk.
Welcome to phonetics. It's beautifully complex.
The source gives even more examples of these fast speech changes. Like, you have to read it becoming have it or have to.
Yeah, have to is a classic reducer. Because the V in have is voiced, but the T in to is voiceless. The V often becomes voiceless too, sounding like an F. So have to becomes hafta. And if the next word starts with a consonant, sometimes the T drops too, like hafta. The source's half it is probably representing that hafta linked to it.
Okay, hafta. And let me know, becoming lemmy.
Standard reduction. The T in let drops before the M, and me reduces let me know. Super common.
Give me a call becomes gimme.
Yep. Another one that's almost like its own word now in informal speech, gimme.
And back to talk to you, reducing to talk to you.
Exactly, reinforcing that common to reduction and linking pattern. These examples, hafta, lemmy, gimme, talk to you. The source uses them perfectly to show these aren't mistakes. They're features of fast, informal American English. Predictable shortcuts.
They're like the contractions don't or can't, but happening even more dynamically in speech. Understanding these must be key to understanding native speakers.
Absolutely. And key to sounding more natural yourself. If you always say, let me know, very clearly, it marks you as non-native or perhaps overly formal.
Okay, one last detail from the source's breakdown. Intonation again, but on a tag question at the very end, when you get a chance. Okay, it says the okay has a rise in intonation.
Yes. Tag questions like, isn't it? Right. Oh, okay, added onto a statement or request can have different tunes. A rising pitch on okay here typically signals genuine checking or seeking confirmation. It softens the request, give me a call, and invites the listener to agree or acknowledge. Is that all right with you?
So what if it went down?
Okay, down. A falling pitch on a tag often implies the speaker is more certain, maybe just stating something they expect the listener to accept. Or it could sound a bit more like a gentle instruction rather than a request needing confirmation. Compare, you're coming right, rising, checking, versus "you're coming right, falling" sounds more like a statement expecting agreement. The intonation adds that subtle layer of attitude or expectation.
Wow. Even on a tiny word like, okay, the pitch matters that much.
Yeah.
It really drives home how much communication happens beyond just the words themselves.
It truly does. And these are exactly the kinds of subtle, crucial features that shadowing, as described by the source, helps you tune into and eventually reproduce. You're learning the whole package deal of spoken language.
This whole section, digging into the specifics the source highlights, it's been incredibly revealing. It shows there's this whole intricate system operating just beneath the surface of what sounds like simple, casual chat.
It really underscores that spoken language operates by its own set of rules, phonetic rules, rhythmic rules that are quite different from the prescriptive rules of writing. Fluency means mastering this spoken system.
So let's pull this all together now in part 4. The source doesn't just list all these cool phonetic details for fun. It integrates them back into the shadowing practice, right? After breaking down the intonation, the dropped sounds, the links, the stress, all of it, what does it suggest you do next?
It suggests you go back and shadow the entire voicemail again. But this time, you're armed with all the specific knowledge. You're listening for the dropped T's, you're anticipating the schwa, you're feeling the rise and fall of the intonation.
So the analysis informs the next round of practice. You're not just blindly mimicking anymore, you're consciously trying to incorporate those specific features you just learned about.
Exactly. You've dissected the music piece by piece. Now you try to play the whole tune, applying what you learned about the notes, the rhythm, the dynamics.
And the idea is that by doing this repeatedly, listening, noticing the details, then trying to replicate them through shadowing, as the source implies, these things start to become automatic.
That's the goal. Repetition builds the motor patterns. You're training your articulators, your tongue, lips, jaw to make these sounds and transitions smoothly and accurately without conscious thought. It's how conscious understanding, okay, drops here, gradually transforms into unconscious skill,
I just want it naturally.
moving from knowing about it to just doing it.
Precisely.
And presumably, getting these details right, even the tiny ones like the N in doin' or the rise on okay, that's what really contributes to sounding more natural. And that, in turn, must be a huge confidence booster, which was one of the key benefits the source mentioned. Without a doubt. When you start to hear yourself producing sounds and rhythms that genuinely echo native speakers, your confidence soars. You feel less hesitant, less worried about being misunderstood or sounding foreign. It frees up mental energy to just focus on communication. So yes, mastering these nuances directly feeds into that increased fluency and confidence the source promises.
This whole deep dive, guided by the source's focus on shadowing and its breakdown of this voicemail, it really hammers home the value of super close listening and the power of mimicry when it's guided by that kind of detailed awareness.
It shows that really understanding spoken language goes way beyond vocabulary and grammar. You have to get intimate with the sound system itself, the phonetics, the prosody. That's where the key to unlocking high-level fluency often lies.
So as we wrap up this exploration of shadowing and the really granular details of American English pronunciation from our source material, it definitely leaves you with something to chew on, the next time you're listening to someone talk.
Yeah, maybe consider this. Just how much intricate hidden structure is packed into everyday casual speech. All those reductions, links, intonation shifts, they're not mistakes or laziness. They are the highly efficient systematic features of the spoken code.
And it makes you wonder, what other subtle cues or patterns are we completely missing if we only listen for the words? If we don't train our ears to catch the how as well as the what?
And maybe the deepest question to ponder. Does paying really close attention to how something is phrased, the precise tone, the rhythm, the specific points of emphasis, does that sometimes fundamentally alter the meaning of what's being said?
Something to think about on your own language journey. And maybe, just maybe, a good reason to try listening a little more like a shadow yourself.